Okay, so I believe it's recording. Does it appear to be recording? Yes. All right. Great to see everyone, and welcome to the pro tips for preparing constructive, high quality, and timely peer reviews. And we welcome all of our incoming student editorial board members with SPR. Very exciting to see each of you and have an opportunity to present some information briefly, as well as interact. And for those of you that are active on social media, such as X, or it used to be Twitter or whatever, feel free to post information. We'll also be sharing this information on the SPR YouTube channel so that others can access it and learn from the contents that we're sharing today. And our brief agenda is to share some gratitude, provide perspective, describe briefly the process of peer review, also review the preparation, identifying key questions, and also preparing the report. We'll hopefully have time to do some brief breakout groups where you can have an opportunity to interact a bit, and then also Q&A there at the end. So to begin with, it's important to express gratitude and also introduce myself, but grateful for the many contributions of all of our School Psych Review editorial leadership team colleagues, our editorial fellows, as well as our general editorial board members and our continuing student editorial board members. And so I'll mention a few of those folks in particular here in the next couple of slides. Just to provide context, I've met some of you, but not all of you. I've been in email communications with all of you, but my name's Jimerson, and I'm a professor at the University of California here in Santa Barbara. And I've been at this for almost 3 decades now. And so I've published more than 400 publications throughout my career. I've got more than 20 years of experience as an editor and also as associate editor of journals. And I've also, in addition, edited more than 15 books that are similar sort of process in terms of the review and providing feedback and these types of things. And then I also have about 25 plus years of extensive service in advocating for the science, practice, and policy relevant to school psychology. And I've listed some of those organizations below, including NASP and ISPA, CASP, as well as AERA, the Division 16 of of APA, as well as within APA, and then of course with the Society for the Study of School Psychology as well. So that sort of provides a bit of perspective as to what I've been experiencing and where my lessons learned come from. So hopefully that's going to be helpful. As I mentioned, absolutely grateful for our SPR leadership team colleagues, and I think many of you know these folks. Some of you are advised by these folks and mentored by these folks. And so across and throughout the country, we've got such distinguished colleagues who are contributing to the SPR leadership team as senior editors, as associate editors, as consulting editors, and each of these folks have been with me, and I've been with them we're the leadership team throughout the process the past few years since I had come on as editor-in-chief of School Psychology Review. Importantly, we also have a number of editorial fellows who have joined us over the years, and that includes Tamika LaSalle and Chunyan Yang. And Chunyan has also recently become associate editor, so she was an editorial fellow. They're both guest editors in preparing a forthcoming special topic section. And they have both been leaders in the field already. Tamika LaSalle has become the editor-in-chief of the Journal of the School and Educational Psychology. So she's also in an editor position presently, in addition to Chunyan being associate editor with SPR. So we're grateful for their contributions and efforts. Also, Yui Kim, Justin Allen are both editorial fellows who have been working in multiple capacities. Dr. Kim's already featured multiple special topic sections that she has been taking the lead on and responsible for, as well as she and Dr. Allen are presently working in collaboration with other colleagues, Dr. Jorge Gonzalez, on a special topic focused on immigrant youth, for instance. So that's quite exciting. So we want to acknowledge their contributions. And then Dr. Chavez Phelps and Matthew Gormley, they're both more recent editorial fellows, and they've been working to provide leadership and analysis for multiple special topic sections, and also fulfilling roles as action editors on various topics. So welcome to, we appreciate and welcome each of their contributions. And then our most recent editorial fellows, who are also here with us today, as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Caitlin Chambers and Dr. Maggie Chen, they are our most recent, and also importantly, these are our first two editorial fellows who were also previously SPR student editorial board members. Woo! Big round of applause for both of them. And not only were they SPR student editorial board members, they were each both independently recognized as outstanding student editorial board review members of the year. So that's quite remarkable. And in Dr. Chambers' instance, she actually has received that recognition twice. Quite a feat, and amazing contributions from each of them. And they are very keen to help provide some guidance and mentoring for each of you, as you'll learn today. Towards the end, they have an opportunity to be providing you with further discussion, consultation, and that sort of thing. So again, welcome to Dr. Chambers and Dr. Chen. Great to have you folks on board as well. And then what else we're going to talk about today is to provide a brief perspective, process of the peer review, a bit of preparation, key review questions, preparing the report, and then the question and answer. So we'll go ahead and turn our attention in earnest to each of these topics now. Okay, is everybody good in terms of we got fine audio? We're making good progress, hanging in there? All right. Okay, so, and you folks had each completed the Nature Masterclass, for instance, as well as reviewing the SPR reviewer guidelines. And so some of this will just be highlighting some information that was in there, and then there will be also some additional information, sort of pro tips and such. So in terms of the benefits of peer review, as many of you noted in your reflections, that it's an opportunity to contribute to advancing science and scholarship in general. And of course, in order for each of us to get our articles published in the various journals, we're dependent upon those members of our profession that serve as editorial board members. And so we're grateful also for each of you as student editorial board members to help develop these skills, learn these skills, and contribute. And then also each of you will have access to scholarship far before publication. Many of you recognize that it takes multiple years through the process of submission, revision, resubmission, possibly several times. Then it gets into the queue to go into publication. And fortunately, nowadays, there is online first. So after an article is accepted for publication, it is available online first. But then it's typically at least 9 months to a year and a half before that article would be featured in an actual issue, a volume of any given journal. And so you folks have access to scholarship prior to publication, and of course some studies that may not even ultimately be published. But so hopefully that's going to be beneficial for you. And also through the process, one thing that I've really benefited from throughout my career and as a student reviewing papers is that it provided an opportunity for me to refine my own scholarship. So I hope this is true for each of you. And for example, back in the day, the 1900s was when I was in graduate school, right? Pre-internet, when things were distributed Pony Express and such, I was always so eager to receive the written comments from each of the other reviewers when the editor had made a decision. So back in the day, all that was done via snail mail, so to speak. Whereas nowadays, once a decision is made, you as the reviewer receive the decision and the cover letter, the decision letter, but you'll also receive the other reviews of the other reviewers. And I was always so excited to receive that package. And even as I'm talking about it, I still remember, being in there and looking at what other folks caught. And then I'm like, oh, wow. Oh, and sometimes they note what I noted. Sometimes they noted other things that I didn't have the awareness of. I just really appreciated that, because given that I'd taken a deep dive with that particular paper and provided a review, it was always so helpful. And it really does have an opportunity to enhance each of our writing skills. So hopefully you're embracing this opportunity, both in terms of what you can contribute, as well as what you can learn, and then ultimately how it can benefit you personally through your process of writing and such. Because the types of feedback that's provided by the other editorial board members, as we'll discuss later, as well as the action editor, will hopefully be very valuable to inform how to further refine the writing. And so hopefully you're oriented towards this as just a tremendous learning opportunity, right? Now, in terms of this illustration, it's kind of the historical, for those of you that can't see the small font there, it says, most scientists regarded the new streamlined peer review process as quite an improvement. And of course, you note that what's happening here is you're running the gauntlet, right? So we want to have a better, more constructive, more supportive review process and feedback process. In some areas, in some journals, it definitely feels like you're running through and people are bashing you. But we want to have a different experience here within our context, okay? Okay, so just a brief overview in terms of clearly School Psych Review being published by Taylor and Francis, and also through the association with National Association of School Psychologists, NASP. And one of the things that folks recognized through looking at the materials was that when these papers go through review, there were various systems of anonymous review that were implemented. And several of you had commented on that, recognizing that there's different versions. And as papers sort of go through this process, we're recognizing that initially we're screening those at the leadership level. I'm reviewing each of the papers prior to them being distributed to an action editor. The action editor is also screening them prior to distributing them to the invites to editorial board members, including student editorial board members. And then when they do, that's where you each have an opportunity to contribute your perspective, as we'll discuss in a moment. And ultimately, those recommendations are to the action editor. The action editor then crafts the decision letter, and then the action editor sends that decision letter to me as the editor-in-chief. And then we determine whether the paper is, major revisions or tentatively accepted or rejected. Please don't resubmit type of thing. So again, those things all happen right here. And importantly, what I wanted to note is that we within School Psych Review are using a triple anonymous peer review process, which I don't believe was actually described in the other masterclass, because historically the double-blind peer, or they call it double-blind peer review, but we're trying to use a more optimal term, triple anonymous peer review. And so when we go through the process, the authors, the action editors, and the editorial board members are each anonymous, so that we're giving everyone a fair shake in terms of our efforts to advance equity and have it not be based on someone recognizing someone's name or stature or university affiliation or whatever it might be. So this is important to note that we use a triple anonymous review system. There are some few instances where some information will make it into the paper, the manuscript, and we try to catch those in advance. If you happen to catch one, you can always just email me or the action editor, but I guess just email me because you won't know who the action editor is, although in the system you can reply. If you let me know, we can clean that up real quick, especially as we move towards also encouraging authors to include positionality statements. Sometimes that gets a bit delicate because the information in some instances can be very identifying, so to speak. So we're always trying to figure out how to best implement the author positionality statement information, and sometimes it gets included within the paper. But in general, we're emphasizing a triple anonymous peer review process. Sound good to everyone? Okay. All right. So then we have a focus on timely, expedited peer review with an overall 1-month timeline. And this illustration just basically gives you a sense of what's happening when the paper comes in. It takes a couple of days for the SPR editorial staff to process that and try to check to see if there's any identifying information and all the pieces are organized in the way that they should be. Then it gets assigned to me as the editor. I review the paper, try to check to see again if there's anything that stands out that's a miss, determine whether or not it will be a desk reject, which almost 50% of the papers are rejected and they never go beyond our leadership team or my review. And then those that are then go to the action editor. The action editor typically within about 3 or 5 days will have distributed it to the invitations to the reviewers. And then we give this 2-week period. We typically emphasize the 14-day period. You'll receive reminders and such within the system. and the 14 days for the review. And for the student editorial board members, remember, when you receive the invitation, you'll be sharing that invite with your mentor, and then you'll complete your review and share your review with the mentor. You'll give your mentor a PDF copy of the paper so that they can also provide you with good feedback and information such that your review will be super high quality, super informed, because you're going to do a great job with it. Plus your mentor will help dial it in if warranted. So then it gets pushed, then you submit your review, and then the action editor, well, each of the reviewers need to submit the reviews, and then the action editor is able to go through those. Sometimes it's 3, 4, 5, reviews, and then they make the decision, and then they forward that to me as the editor. And then all of the correspondence goes out within a couple of days of me receiving all of this information, and I look at your reviews, and I look at the action editor's reviews, and then I then send the final decision correspondence. I can add, edit, that type of thing in there. And then that happens within a couple of days, and that goes out under my name because we're using triple anonymous process. I signed up for this online. I think Lamia, it might be, see if I can mute. There we go. So that's kind of the process. That's all typically unfolding within about a 30-day period, and there are a few instances due to other conflicts and challenges where it does take a little bit longer. But our general commitment is I think right now we were averaging something like 22 days or something. So overall, we're in that zone, but there are some papers that go beyond due to unpreventable circumstances type of thing. So, okay. You folks have reviewed the peer review guidelines for SPR. You've also participated in the Nature Masterclass. Really appreciated the feedback and reflections that each of you had provided. Thank you for including me along with your mentor in sharing those thoughts and reflections. There's some really great ones out there. There's one that really documented in detail all of the different steps, and they sort of provided the rationale that it was for their own personal benefit and growth, but they also agreed that I could share that with others. So I'll be sharing their brief sort of chronicle of what they took away based on each of the sections. I'll share that with folks because it was very comprehensive. It wasn't required to do it as comprehensively, and I appreciate all the comments from each of you, but I'll be sharing that one in the future as well. And we really do have this emphasis on the constructive, high quality, timely reviews. You saw that throughout the SPR guidelines, and we'll emphasize that today as well. Okay, so then when you receive the invitation to review a manuscript, you want to immediately determine whether or not you can complete the review within the next 14-day period, because sometimes it comes at a really not good time for you. And even though you're interested in the topic and you feel that you would like to, you realize with the papers you have due and the exams coming up and the travel and the wedding and all of these other things in your life, that if you cannot commit to doing it within that 14-day, then you would say no and decline the invitation. But if you can, then you say yes and you accept the invitation. And then overall, if there's anything that could reasonably be perceived as interfering with your objective review, then inform me as the editor. Okay, so let me know, and then we can have you unassigned to that, uninvited, so to speak, from that manuscript. And I also sent out the COPE guidelines, the COPE ethical guidelines for peer reviewers, just to recognize that this is an important piece. So if you have any competing interest or anything that interferes with you providing an objective review on a paper, let us know. Sometimes you didn't realize it was from a colleague at your institution, but once you looked at the paper, you're like, oh, I read this paper last week before it was submitted, right? So then obviously that would be an instance where you would let us know, and then we could invite someone who's not peer or not a colleague at the same institution, for example, right? Okay. Okay, so in terms of pro tips, once you accept the invitation to review, as I mentioned previously, and I'll send out via email, the process is once you do accept that invitation, you're going to download a PDF copy of the article. You're going to share that with your mentor to let them know basically the clock is ticking. I have accepted this paper for review, and provide them with a copy of the paper, and then go ahead and work on doing your review. Sometimes early on, student editorial board members like to discuss some of it with their faculty mentor prior to drafting it. We do provide good templates for what it should look like and the format and all. But it's up to you, and hopefully we've just had tremendously great success with our mentors really being committed to this process. And so I'm anticipating that many of you have mentors who had previously mentored another student editorial board member previously. Some of you have colleagues who are new to the process, but again, once you've accepted it, you'll share you'll download the PDF, and then you'll share a copy with your faculty mentor. All right. And then here are some details about things to think about. Some of this overlaps with what was in the guidelines. Some of this overlaps with the Nature Masterclass, but these are things that I think warrant repeating. So for instance, questions to consider as you read through the paper for the first time, right? So as you're beginning, you're thinking about, is the relevant literature reviewed in the introduction, right? Are the conceptual foundations delineated? Are the research questions clearly articulated? Is the design of the study appropriate to address the questions, right? So once you've read the questions that are posed, then when you're reading the methods, you really want to think about, is this really an appropriate way to examine those questions, right? Are there any fundamental flaws in the study design, right? Are all the conclusions supported by data? So when you're looking at the discussion in particular, as you read through it the first time, are they making statements and conclusions that are supported by the data, or are they sort of going beyond the data, right? So that's something to be careful and take a look at. Are the unique contributions of this study clear? And there's multiple places where you can see that articulated, possibly in the abstract, possibly in the impact statement, and certainly it should be delineated clearly in the discussion section. Okay. And then also, is the content of the study appropriate for the journal? All right. And again, you folks are familiar with School Psych Review, published by the National Association of School Psychologists. Our focus is bringing science to practice to inform policy, advance practice. We're committed to advancing diversity and equity and justice in the field of school psychology and the services that we provide and the science that we're contributing. So you want to determine, is this an appropriate study to be featured in the journal, right? And there's some places in the online submission system where you'll have an opportunity to provide some sort of numerical rankings as to the degree to which it is or not, right? So you'll have a chance to comment on that within the system. And then who would be interested in reading this study, right? And we really want to think, are the readers of School Psych Review the likely audience and patrons to embrace this information that's been featured? So this is just when you're first reviewing it, and I just suggest you read through the paper for the first time, just thinking about these types of things, just kind of give it that first read, all right? Then, then sort of going back and diving into each section, when you're looking at the abstract, 3 key questions that must be answered. What question or questions does this paper address? What methods were used and who participated? And then the big question is, so what, right? And does it advance science? Does it advance practice? Does it advance policy? Maybe some combination thereof. But we always want to attend to this so what question. So ask yourself that when you're reviewing the abstract. And again, if they haven't articulated that, that's the type of feedback that you can provide to the authors. And it might be that they share this information in the contents, but you're also trying to highlight that this information should be featured in the abstract. So when you're providing the review, you could comment on that, like this information was included in the paper, but you need to make this clear in the abstract, for example. Okay. And then in reviewing the introduction, 3 key questions. Again, does it accurately describe relevant contemporary research with properly referenced statements? Right? Does it clearly set up why this study is necessary? And then also, do the citations included adequately reflect the current state of science in the field? Okay, so you're looking for those contemporary citations, not just having, right? So if an article only had publications featured during the 70s and 80s, it might make you wonder why there isn't more contemporary citations. Again, it's okay to every now and then have a seminal study from 1978 or 1997 or whatever, but you also are looking for that contemporary scholarship that's featured in the introduction. So you want to be thoughtful about that. And then once you go to the methods, you're thinking about questions such as, is the methodology described in sufficient detail? The sampling procedures, the participants, whether or not there are controls or comparisons. What measures, how are they clearly described? What are the psychometric properties? Are they established? And then also in looking at the outcomes that are being examined, are those constructs clearly understandable? So also, are the instruments or the techniques sound? So you're applying sort of that methodological rigor level of analysis. And then also, are the analytical procedures sound? And so sometimes there's instances where the nature of the analyses are not optimal, or sometimes even flawed in the sense of the type of approach they took. So you want to be thoughtful about the analytical procedures and determine whether those are sound as well. Okay, then reviewing the results in the discussion. Again, 3 quick pro tips there. Are the results well organized and presented clearly? Do the authors discuss their results in the context of the other published studies, available literature, right? And then also, is the discussion reasonable considering the study design? For example, correlation does not equal causation. So if someone's run a lot of basic correlational analyses, which even regressions and others are based on correlational elements and considerations, then we want to be careful to look at the way that the authors are phrasing the results and their discussion of those. And sometimes it doesn't mean that the paper is not appropriate or acceptable. It just means that sometimes authors are extending beyond what is a reasonable way to frame the conclusions as related to the findings themselves, given the nature of analyses. Okay. All right, so that's a little bit about results and discussion. And then in terms of reviewing the conclusions, be very clear about, do these conclusions answer the research questions, right? You're looking for that alignment. It's even excellent when the conclusion section is organized a bit by the research questions to make that clear. But if not, if it's not organized in that manner, you're trying to extract that information. The second is the conclusion supported by the results, or are there alternative explanations for the results? And this is important because as authors are discussing their findings and having their conclusions, there also should be attending to the limitations. And sometimes that has to do with the information informing the interpretation is only those items and those variables that the author has included within that particular study, within that particular sample, within that particular population. And so we also want to be clear that there could be other potential explanations, and to the degree that the authors are sort of overstating this absolute association and interpretation, we just want to be cautious about that and be aware of that as we go through it, okay? And then the third dimension with reviewing the conclusions is, do the authors clearly explain the implications of the study for the field of school psychology? So it's not enough just to have a great study that's really impressive and interesting. It also needs to articulate clearly how these results are useful and beneficial and can have implications specifically for either advancing science and/or practice and/or policy in the field of school psychology. So keep an eye out for that, because we are an interdisciplinary journal. Not every author is a school psych person, student, faculty member, practitioner. But we want to make sure that our colleagues in other areas, interdisciplinary, are also focusing on sharing and explaining the implications for the study of school psychology and advancing our field, okay? All right, in terms of reviewing the tables, 3 quick questions that should be answered. One is, are they clearly delineated? And this is something I learned very early on in my own journey, that if you just look at that table, it should stand on its own. There's no version of an optimal table that requires me to read and figure stuff out elsewhere. There's got to be appropriate notation. there's got to be appropriate information in there. And I encourage each of you to try to take that test with your own tables and figures, right? Like, could this stand on its own and be meaningful without, being all the explanation that's in all the text? So you want to look at that. Are they clearly delineated? Also, are they helpful? Sometimes folks are including tables and figures that aren't necessary. And so that's another consideration. If they're not necessary, then you could recommend that they be submitted and included with the article, but as supplemental tables, supplemental materials. And that's important because if you're not familiar with this previously, it's important that you consider this today, that in your own writing and when you're reviewing articles, it could be that there would be some helpful information, but it's not necessary, and you could submit that and it's included. So when you review a paper, there may be specific tables, figures, or other information that's specified as supplementary materials. And importantly, that information is directly linked to the paper when it's published. So if it's accepted and published as an article, that information would be available with a digital access instantly, right? So it's still part of the paper, and we still each need to review it. Does that make sense? We need to review what's in the supplementary materials, and also we can recommend in some instances, if they've got 7 tables or maybe worse, 17 tables, we might recommend that they put 3 or 5 or 15 of those into supplementary, or we might just suggest for some, just don't know, it's just not helpful. It was not enhancing it at all. Like you could say that in words in such more succinct manner. So with supplementary tables, some new information for some of you, or is everybody already familiar with that? Was it new for some? Okay. All right. Okay, so that's about the tables. Also, similarly with the figures. Similarly, are they clearly delineated? Can they stand on their own? And the same things, are they helpful? Are they necessary? You're applying the same logic model and making certain that things are clearly understood, clearly delineated. So tables and figures are quite a big deal to make sure that they're helpful, meaningful, accurate, and that sort of thing. Okay. In terms of preparing the report, want to be sure you're thinking about the tone, the structure, and the content. All right, so we're going to discuss each of these in brief, and very important as you're preparing these, as the report that you present or prepare and submit is what the authors will be seeing, right? So you want to be very thoughtful about preparation of the report. So I'll give you the meta message first, which is be kind whenever possible. It is always possible, okay? So keep this in mind. What I usually share with all of our general editorial board members that are at all different points in their career and journey is that it's often the case that one of the authors on any given paper is a student author, right? That one of the authors is an early career scholar. That one of the authors, this is the first time they've ever submitted a paper, a professional paper. If we keep that in mind, in addition to these next few things, we want to proceed with kindness and be constructive, okay? Because we're not trying to bash them and have them be disgruntled or dismayed or, feeling incompetent. We're trying to give them constructive, honest feedback that will be helpful to further advance and inform their scholarship and revising that paper. And even if it's a reject, by the way, meaning that paper is not invited to be resubmitted to this journal, it's likely those authors are going to revise that paper and resubmit it to another journal. That's just the reality. So we each want to provide them with an opportunity to take the information in and revise that manuscript and resubmit to another journal and not be discouraging them. So the general guidelines: be kind, be constructive, be objective, be clear, be transparent, be respectful, be organized, and be succinct, okay? So These elements here, very important general guidelines as you prepare the report. The structure of the report, we've provided a general outline in the SPR reviewer guidelines, so you're welcome to copy paste those. I can't remember if it was a PDF file or a Word file. I think I sent the Word file version, so you're welcome to copy paste that from whatever. But essentially, you want to feature, a summary of the research and overall impression. So this is the first little brief paragraph that has a few sentences highlighting what your interpretation of it was overall. And it's good to, commend the authors on things that they had done well and/or the importance of the topic. Embrace their strengths, so to speak. But then also, what you thought about to the degree that it was meeting the mark or not. And then evidence and examples. So you separate these, for instance, into like major and minor issues. Within major, you could delineate intro or abstract intro, methods, discussion, tables, figures. You can organize that either using our template outline or another version, and you'll see some variation. You might see some other examples of reviewers that over time you like the way they organize theirs even better. So it's not like we're doing a cookie cutter version where we expect everyone's to look the same, but we're just trying to give you some guidance, especially early on, given that you haven't maybe done a lot of these. And then other points at the bottom where it's kind of more the miscellaneous. And there is a review template that's available through PLOS, and the information there is included, I think, in the information I've been sending out, but I can also send this PowerPoint if folks want to be able to access. I think those were actually in the SPR reviewer guidelines, these same HTTP, yeah. Okay, so then the content of the report, as we mentioned, that brief summary paragraph at the beginning, you identify these key considerations, then your major comments, as I mentioned, organized by abstract, intro, methods, results, discussion, includes the significant concerns that you have, for example, if there's problems with the study design or insufficient data or improper referencing, unaddressed limitations, the types of things we've been discussing. And then also if there's minor comments. So include the smaller points, like if there's need for improvement to clarify or minor errors that you're noticing. Again, you're not copy editors, so don't feel like you have to go through and, that's too much effort. If there's general copy editing challenges, you can just note that and provide a couple of examples and say, please attend to the APA 7th edition style format type of thing, right? You don't need to be going through and giving every author every detail. Give them a few examples, but it's not going to be a great use of your time to copy edit the entire, detail the copy edit revisions, but give them some examples if they need to attend to that carefully. And then ultimately, remember this point, do not state your recommendation regarding publication within your review. You save that for the confidential comments to the editors, and you'll actually be clicking a box that's indicating whether you're suggesting that it should be reject, or resubmission not encouraged, or whether it should be major revisions suggested or minor revisions. You'll be checking a box. You'll be selecting one of those. And if you have specific things you want to say to us as the action editors, then you can put that in the confidential comments to the editor, okay? But in your actual decision letter, do not state your recommendation regarding publication. You're providing them with all the information. You're letting us know. You're giving us ratings. So we've got all that information there, but the author is receiving all the constructive comments and that sort of stuff. Okay, so that's important to recognize as well. And then again, the confidential comments to the editors are not viewed by the authors. That's important. It's a great place to share any comments regarding the recommendations for the manuscript. For instance, the three key reasons I recommended accept are this, and that, or the three key reasons I said reject were this, that. You can always do that because sometimes your review is going to be, a page, 2 pages, 3 pages, depending on how much you have to say. But if you want to just share briefly with the editor, those comments are not available to the authors if you just want to provide any brief communication there. Again, just pointed out, do not share the recommendation regarding publication within the review comments. And you can imagine all the various reasons for this, by the way, right? Like if you're saying, oh yeah, this should be accepted, but then everybody else is like, this should be rejected. We'd rather not get into like a voting contest. It's based on the collective contributions of all of the reviewers. We don't want someone saying, oh, well, I had 2 people that it said minor revisions and 1 person that said reject, so therefore I think it should be, it's not about that, because the one who said reject might have caught the fatal flaws that the other 2 didn't, and the action editor and myself, we may agree with reject, even though 2 other people said major revision. You see what I mean? You don't want to turn it into that. So just trying to make that transparent as to why not to include your stated recommendation within the public review letter. Okay. And then you're going to submit your reviews in the Scholar One portal. We will be soon entering in each of you with your email address and setting you up with an account within the Scholar One. You'll save your user ID and your password, and if you can't track it down, just send us a note and we can send your credentials out to you again. Within that system, you can put in your university affiliation. We'll be asking you each to identify your areas of interest and expertise within that system. I think we require at least maybe 3 or 5. I forget what the default is, but I'll also encourage student editorial board members to put in, all of those that make sense, that are areas of expertise and interest that you would feel comfortable. Because if you only put in the minimum number, it's less likely that you would come up when action editors are inviting reviewers, because your name would be identified fewer times. So it's one strategy is to include more. And if you're feeling like you're getting too many reviews or in areas that, or invitations rather, if you're getting too many, you can always go in and change those areas of interest if you want to dial it back a bit in terms of your feeling. But that's usually not the case. I get more folks that are on the student editorial board saying, oh, I'd really like to review. I haven't received many invitations in the past 6 months. And I'll share your information with others and encourage. And so the action editors, when they are looking for reviewers, we have the various categories of reviewers. So we have our general editorial board members, right? We have our analytical and methods reviewers. So those are editorial board members who have specifically designated that they are very interested in reviewing articles based on the methods and procedures and analyses regardless of the content. And they've identified the areas that they have expertise on. And then we also have the student editorial board members. And as action editors, when we decide that a manuscript is, that we're going to invite reviewers for it, we go in and we click on each of those boxes, indicating that we want selected reviewers that match based on the keywords and search terms. That's why it's important that you put yours into the system. That we want folks from each of those categories. So optimally, we've got a couple of editorial board members. We've got a couple of 1 or 2 of the methods and analytical folks. And then we also have at least 1 student editorial board member. We try to do that on each instance. Sometimes we need to invite 2 student editorial board members because maybe 1 is only available, right? But the point is that on most manuscripts, we're encouraging our action editors to try to include at least 1, if not more, student editorial board members, okay? All right, so that's a little bit about Scholar One, and we'll be sending out more correspondence via email to get you oriented and prepped on that front. So don't worry about that today. Don't stress about that. This is a very important point. Do not upload your review as a PDF. So there is an option to attach it, but it's better for us if you paste your review text into the box for reviewer comments that will be shared with the authors. And the reason for this is that if you do upload as a Word file or a PDF or anything else, basically it just means that one of the action editors, but usually myself, end up having to copy paste that information over into the author's feedback box so that when it comes into the letter format, it's all there rather than having these attachments that are hanging out there. So that's just a pro tip. Every now and then it still happens. So paste your review text into the reviewer comments. Do not upload as a PDF. All right. And then, like I said, in the there's a lot of peer review resources that are located in the SPR peer review guidelines. And as I mentioned, these different documents. For those of you that are getting pretty excited about it and very enthusiastic and you have a little bit of bandwidth, maybe your semester is going to be over in a week or something. For those of you that are in that situation, you could potentially take a look at some of these videos and some of these other materials. I know for myself, I was always quite fascinated with these, learning from these, and as well as my mentor. So you see a lot of these different ones. This Publons Academy is a free course in peer review. Again, it's not required, but I mean, I've looked at all of these and completed all of these myself. So I wouldn't ask you to do anything or share anything that I hadn't already gone through myself. But all of these are really valuable. So these are also mentioned in the SPR Reviewer Guidelines document. Okay. All right, so I want to make sure that there's an opportunity to hear from our editorial fellows and see if there's any particular pro tips or words of encouragement. And then following that, we'll have an opportunity to do some brief breakout groups discussion, as well as ask questions and that sort of thing. And maybe we can even ask questions before that. But let's see if any of our colleagues that are on want to share any pro tips based on their experiences, either as action editors, as editorial board members. We'll open up the floor. I see Dr. Chambers is ready to dive in there.
Yeah, so congratulations. This is a huge accomplishment. And I guess one of the tips I would say when I first started, it kind of almost seems overwhelming. You get this big manuscript and you're like, oh my goodness, I have to go line by line. It's okay to open it up, read a little bit and close it, and pick it up another day. I usually will do that, and then I'll go in and set aside some time to review it with my Word document on one side and the manuscript on the other. And just take your time and read it as an audience member. It's something in your wheelhouse. So it should be of some interest to you, and just yeah, read it as an audience member, and take notes as you're doing it. That's kind of how I first started off, and if things are confusing, I note that as well in the paper. So yeah, that's my tip.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Chambers. And Dr. Chan, looks like you're ready to chime in also.
Yeah, and I think I echo what Dr. Chambers mentioned about, and also all the helpful tips that Dr. Jimerson just shared. And I think one thing that I like to do is usually I will write the review report, and then I will go back like a day later. I will read it again, and then before I submit it, because I think a lot of time, like we all have different opinions, perspective, and I always think that like with that a little bit like cool down time and then read it again, and then it's helped us to adjust the tone and also like have a second thought, like how we deliver the comment, the feedback. Another thing I like to do is now when I write my review reports, I will always like think about like if I were the authors, would I understand how to improve the manuscript based on my comments? I think a lot of time like that will help me to write into more like a concrete specific comment, and I think it will be conducive to the reviewers when they have to address those comments. So that's just some of my personal experience.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Chan. And like I said, these are words of wisdom from folks that have stood out. I mean, there's been a lot of student editorial board members across the years here with us. It's only during this current contemporary term, as I've taken on editor-in-chief, that we've established a student editorial board. But there's been many that we've had over this past 3-4 years here. And Dr. Chambers and Dr. Chan had really stood out as outstanding members and contributors. And so grateful for their previous contributions, as well as their current and their ongoing commitment to continuing to help support each of you as well. So thank you, Dr. Chambers and Dr. Chan. Appreciate it. And we do have a little bit of time here. That what I was hoping for is that we could go into breakout rooms to have brief discussion, but I also do want to ask if there's any other particular questions that folks have now. I know we have another slide later where we can circle back to that, but is there any particular question that's come up where you want to kind of get clarity before you engage in a breakout discussion? Let's see if anybody has anything. I was looking at the chat as well. Okay, well, it's crystal clear. These slides are just spectacularly clear. All right, I love it. All right, let me see if I do the math real quick. Maybe what I'll try to do is put, let me think if this will do about 4 groups. It's about 4, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, maybe about 4 groups, and then I'll try to see if Dr. Chambers, Dr. Chan, and I end up in different rooms, and then that way we could always be there to participate. And basically, we're hoping that it's an opportunity for you to introduce yourselves to each other. You can share any experiences that you have, either preparing papers or any questions that you have. It's another chance to network and get familiar with other folks who are engaged in this process, because we'll be sending lots of emails, but we also want to build a community, right? And as you're going to see in the slides when we come back, Dr. Chambers and Dr. Chan are committed to also providing additional resources and opportunities to come together to be supportive. So also partially consider this a professional development, community building, networking opportunity. Each of you have incredible advisors and mentors throughout the country in school psychology. So get to know each other a little bit. And if you do have particular experiences or questions to share, that's great as well. And if Dr. Chambers, Chan, and I end up in the same room, I'll shuffle us. I think I can change that, I think. Okay. All right, let's see what it does. Oh, okay, so there's that. Let me just quickly scan Chambers. Okay. Okay, and then, okay, yeah. It looks like it put us into the different areas. And let me just move one person to make this other room. Okay, there we go. All right, so there'll be maybe well, gosh, hold on. Let me make 3 rooms because there's 3 of us. How's that? Let's see what that did. Okay, that messed it up. Hold on. Okay, this way I'll pop in with the other group. Okay, I think we're good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just looking at the number of people in each of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me put one more here. There we go. Okay. Now we've got it set. So we'll take just about 10 minutes or 10 to 12 minutes here just to get to know each other, interact a bit, and then we'll come back together. Does that sound like a good plan? Everybody fired up about this? All right, here we go. I'll open up all the rooms. Woohoo. There we go. Okay, and then
How are you?
Good. How's everyone doing?